Hi, this is Eric with iFixPhones.com, and this video is part of the iPhone 4 AT&T module. So the first step in the process is we need to turn the phone off. And while we're waiting for the phone to go ahead and power down, I'm going to take our paper clip and I'm going to remove the SIM tray. Now you'll notice as I take everything out of the phone, I like to do what I call the grid method, which means that I take everything out of the phone, and as I take it out of the phone, I place it from top to bottom and left to right. And I do that because it helps me keep all my parts organized, and it helps me remember where they need to go back in the phone when I'm putting it back together. Next, we're going to take the two bottom screws out of the phone, and to do that, you're going to need your pentalobe screwdriver. It's really important when you're taking these screws out not to press too hard and not to strip out the pentalobe screwdriver. I go through probably 6 or 7 of these screwdrivers each month because they're very delicate and the screws are much stronger than the metal on the screwdriver. So just be aware of that. Next, using your thumbs, gently push up on the back of the back glass and take it out. Next, we're going to need to remove the battery. And in order to do that, we have to remove the screw that holds the battery connector into place. Once the screw has been removed, I'm going to use my fingernail to pry up from this angle the battery connector. Now just underneath the battery connector is a small piece that actually holds the antenna of the phone in place. And we're going to set that down right next to the screw. Now the next step in the process is actually taking the battery out. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this small little piece of plastic and we're going to gently pull on it until the battery pops out. Now sometimes this can be really, really difficult. This time it came out pretty easy. But if you ever have a time where you're having a lot of trouble getting the battery out, sometimes you can actually use a credit card or something like that. And as long as you use it at the very bottom part of the phone right here, you'll be able to use that as a pry tool to get it out. Now the last thing we ever want to do is to use a metal piece anywhere near the battery or a metal piece anywhere near the circuit board. And the reason we don't do that is because we don't want to damage them. If you puncture the battery with any type of metal, it will actually catch on fire. And if you touch any metal pieces to the motherboard, you could also damage it, in which case you'd have to replace the phone. The next piece we're going to remove from the phone is the little white disc that sits on top of this screw right here. And this white disc, as you can see here, is the water sensor. And I always place that just on top of the battery because it's the very last thing that we put back in the phone when we're finished. Next, we're going to remove these two screws in the upper right-hand corner of the phone. These screws hold in the vibration mechanism. And sometimes this guy doesn't want to pop out on his own, so I'll use my tweezers. And as you can see, the screw on the left is much longer than the screw on the right. Now we're going to remove the 5 screws at the top of the phone, and these screws hold down the bracket that keep all of our pin connections in place. So from right to left, we're going to set these screws on our mat in, again, what I call the grid. And like I said before, that grid is going to help you to remember where each screw goes when you put the phone back together. Now notice that I put all the screws on the mat in the exact same pattern that they go in the bracket. Now to get the bracket out, I've seen a lot of people just try to pry it out of there. And you really don't need to do that. In fact, you can damage it by doing so. All you need to do is use your flat-headed miniature screwdriver and tuck it just underneath the brackets connector right here and turn it like a key and it pops right out. is you'll see there's a little tooth on the back side of this connector that actually holds it into place. So like I said, just tuck it right underneath it and pop it out. Next, we need to remove the bracket that holds down the dock connector ribbon cable, and that has 2 screws just over here to the left, about halfway down the phone. And of course, we're going to remove the bracket and set that right below. Again, as you can see, top to bottom, left to right, and I've got all my parts right here in front of me. Now, using my fingernail, and again, the last thing I'd ever want to do is to use, a metal piece or something like that because you could damage the motherboard. I'm going to use my fingernail, which is what I like to use, to gently lift up on each one of these ribbon cables. So the first one I'm going to do is this one right here. This is your digitizer ribbon cable. That's the one that controls the touchscreen. The one right next to it is your LCD connection. The one right next to that, this small one right here, this one controls your headphone jack and your volume buttons. The one in the middle controls your proximity sensor and your power button, and this last one controls the front camera. So now that we've got all 5 of those undone, we're going to go ahead and use our thumb to pop up the ribbon cable of the camera, and then we're going to pop the camera out. Just wiggle that out of there, just like that. If it's not coming out real easy, just use your fingernail on the top half of it and just pop it right out. The next thing we're going to do is remove this ribbon cable, which connects to our dock. Again, in the bottom right-hand corner, use your fingernail and just gently pop it up. Now this ribbon cable is actually held onto the motherboard with quite a bit of adhesive, and you want to be very gentle as you peel this back so as to not damage the ribbon cable and to not tear it because it's held down there by the adhesive. Now before we go any further to remove the motherboard, what we need to do is again take our flat-headed screwdriver and just very gently lift up on this black cord right here at the bottom, right next to where the battery connector was. And this here is our antenna, so we want to pop that guy right off. Next, we need to remove 1, 2, 3, 4 screws in order to remove the motherboard and the dock connector. We're going to start by using our flat-bladed screwdriver up here in the top right-hand corner. And the reason we have to use a flat blade for this one is because another screw, in fact, this screw right here, screws inside of this one when you put it back together. Pretty nifty. Next, we're going to do the one that rests at the middle of the motherboard. And lastly, we're going to take out the bottom 2. And again, notice how, as I take it apart, I use my grid and I keep everything right where it needs to be. Now, once I've taken these last 2 out, you can kind of see. Now, to pull out the motherboard, as you can see, it's kind of already popping up just a little bit. So all I'm going to do is just grab it right here in the bottom left-hand corner and just gently slide it out. Now, as you can see here, this little rubber guy, sometimes he likes to fall off. This rubber piece protects the ribbon cables right here from rubbing up against the motherboard, and it's a very important piece, so we never want to lose that. Set the motherboard right there, and the dock connector slides right out. At this point, we have 10 screws that we need to remove in order to take off the front screen. We've got 3 on each side. And 1 in each of the 4 corners. Now I can use this screwdriver to remove 3 of the 4. The one in the top right-hand corner is sort of at a peculiar angle, which is why I mentioned that extra 000 screwdriver. So I use this screwdriver for better clearance. As you can see, it pops right out. Now, the last 6 screws don't actually need to come all the way out of the phone. I'm going to go ahead and tuck this guy out of the way and actually use the adhesive to adhere it to the metal piece right there. And with each of these 6 screws, I'm just going to go ahead and do about 3 turns because I don't really need to take them all the way out of the phone to get the screen off. Now that the 4 corner screws are removed and the 6 on the sides are loose, we can take our flat-bladed X-Acto tool and start to work the screen off. Typically, I start in the top right-hand corner. As you can see, I'm turning it just like a key all the way down the side. As I move to the bottom, as you can see, it's getting a little bit tougher. That's because underneath here, there's quite a bit of adhesive that helps hold the screen down. And you'll feel it pop off once that adhesive gives way. So because so much of the glass was missing on this one up top, it actually removed pretty easily. Now you want to be careful. The 2 ribbon cables that connect the LCD screen and the digitizer actually feed through the phone's bezel. So as we remove this, we want to be very careful and gentle as to how we pull it out. There we go. Pops out just like that. Now typically, when you're repairing a phone screen, this piece right here, it's a little metal mesh piece that keeps dust particles and things like that from going into the speaker. We actually use that on the new screen. And you can see this piece right here is called the camera diffuser. The camera diffuser is typically connected on the glass on the broken screen. And what we do is we usually remove that by using this tool. Like I said, typically it's going to be attached just up here in the right-hand corner. We use this tool to pop it off. Now before we move forward, we're going to go ahead and take the camera stabilizer, and we're going to place that back in the hole. And it's pretty easy to tell which way it goes in there because it's got little teeth on it. I'm just going to tuck that guy back in there like so. And then I'm going to set this off to the side. Now on our new screen, you'll notice they don't come with the mesh piece that keeps stuff from getting inside the earpiece on the phone. So that's why we use the old one from the old phone. Now in this case, like I said, because it was so broken, it came right out. And what I'm doing now is I'm just cleaning it off. And I'm actually peeling off the adhesive that's left over, because typically it's not sticky enough to keep it in the phone. And the last thing we want once we get the phone put back together is for it to fall out. So as you can see, I've kind of scraped it off. I'm just going to set that right back down. Now, using this flat, small piece of adhesive, I'm just going to cut a really tiny piece with my X-Acto blade. I'm going to put it right here on the inside of the new screen. Now some people might say, well, what if you could see that from the other side? You actually cannot see that. It's completely painted through and you won't be able to see it. And this adhesive is much stronger than the original adhesive and will keep your new earphone screen in place properly. And you'll never be able to tell the difference. There you go. So as you can see, I've now got them in place, and I'm just going to peel off the back side. And place the old one right where it belongs. Beautiful. Now as you can see, it looks just like a new one. Before putting it on, I need to peel this guy off. And as I told you before, we're going to have to feed these right back through the bezel in the top right-hand corner. Now the most important thing when you feed this through is on this back one, the digitizer one, there's actually a small little ribbon at the bottom. And if these aren't the same length as you put them through, you haven't gotten it through all the way. So we feed those through, and I'm going to hold it with my hand just like this, and I'm actually going to pull down on the digitizer one just to make sure it gets through all the way. And as you can see, they're exactly the same length. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now, once we've got the top in, you'll notice that it may be a little bit tougher to get the sides in because there's these washers and the 3 screws on either side. So I set the phone on its side, I kind of give it a little quick tap, and it sits right in. I turn the phone over, I do the same on the other side, and as you can see, it rests right in. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of pressure, just to kind of set it in there. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten the 6 screws on the side. Again, ensuring that the screen is still sitting flush. Now, we're going to replace the 4 corner Now, as you'll recall, this top right one is a little bit tougher to get in. So we use our miniature Phillips head screwdriver which makes it much, much easier. Now that we've got all 10 of our screws back in place and tightened down, the next piece we need to put back in is the speaker. Now, attached to the speaker is your antenna, and these 4 small little prongs are what connect your antenna to the actual bezel of the phone itself, which serves as your antenna. And it's really, really important when you put this back not to break these off. It's one of the easiest mistakes to make. So when you put this back in, we're going to tuck it in, bottom side first, and if you put just enough pressure on, they should slide right into place pretty easily. Now, if you have any issues with that and you can't get them in, I highly recommend using the back end of your tweezers or something to just gently tuck them in so that you don't break them off. Now, while you're still holding this with your finger, we're going to pick up the screw on the bottom right-hand corner, and we're going to place this screw back in to hold it in place. Because if we don't put that screw in, our 4 little prongs here will actually have it pop back out. We don't want that. The next thing we need to do is we need to adjust the new digitizer and LCD ribbons. We're just going to go ahead and push those down so they're kind of bending. And we're going to place our motherboard right back in the phone. Now, the easiest way to get it back in is to kind of take it at an angle like so. Now, if you look right here, there's a little hole in the motherboard, as is down here. And these are little guides, actually, because inside the phone, there's a little pin right here, and there's another pin right down here. And those are sort of your guides. So you want to put the top part in first, like so. And you want to just kind of tuck it in there and move it just to the side. And again, if it doesn't go in there the first time, that's okay. Do not force it. You don't want to break anything. And all we're going to do is we're going to tuck this top piece in right here. And then we're just going to slide it in there. And again, it should rest in there very gently, like so. And again, you have a pin here, and you have a pin here that should show right through the motherboard. Okay? And if those aren't showing perfectly, it's not right. Take it back out and do it again. Okay? Once it's in here, hold it down with your finger again, and we're going to take the middle screw and put that one right back in there on the motherboard, just like so. Beautiful. Now, we're going to take the bottom left-hand screw again, and we're going to put that back in. Perfect. And then we're going to take the top screw and just set it in there. Now remember, this one is the one that you have to use the flat-headed screwdriver to take out, so we need to use the same one to put it back in. just to tighten that up, like so. Perfect. Excellent. Now, we're going to go ahead and take the camera, and we're going to put the camera back in first. We're going to tuck him in there just like so. And it's very important to make sure that the camera gets placed in there properly, because if you restart your phone and the cameras are not in proper, it's very, very difficult to get them back working again. This one. There we go. Just rest right in there. It should sit in there real flush. And then just using your thumb, we're going to just reconnect this right here. And just give it a couple extra pushes just to make sure it's on there right. Okay. Now, we're going to take our tweezers and we're going to reconnect the antenna cable right down here. We're just going to set it right up top, and you should just push on it with your fingernail, and you should feel it pop right into place. It's kind of like Tupperware. You don't want to put a round piece of Tupperware right on top and smash it down. You actually kind of want to start it on one edge and then roll it down forward. So you want to kind of, like I said, start it on one edge and then push it on there, and it'll snap right on there just like a piece of Tupperware. Next, we're going to fold this right back over the top. We're going to replace the ribbon cable for the dock, and with your thumb, you're just going to push it in. You're going to feel it snap right into place, and give it a couple extra nice little pushes just to make sure it's in place. And we're going to do the same thing with each one of these ribbon cables up top. The first one we're going to do is going to be the LCD ribbon cable. We're going to push that one down like so. And each one of these, when you push them down with your thumb, you should feel them snap into place. If you don't feel them snap into place, go ahead, pry them back up, and make sure they're on there right the first time. It's much easier to do everything right the first time than to have to go back and troubleshoot after the fact. Now that all of our ribbon cables are in place, we're going to replace the vibration mechanism. Place it in and hold it down. And I find it much easier to put the long screw in first rather than the short one. And we use this sort of as our placeholder. And as you can see, now that it's in there real tight, I'm going to use my screwdriver to make sure that it's lined up properly. Now, before we put this back on, a lot of people fail to replace one of the most important pieces in the phone. You'll notice that each one of these connections has a piece of foam on top of it. And the reason that foam is there is to keep those in place. And if you don't replace it, you may have an issue down the road with your phone. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the flat end of our X-Acto blade, and we're going to actually get just underneath this, and we're going to very gently peel it up. There we go. We set that right there on top of our LCD, and then we'll replace the bracket that holds all of them into place. Now we want to start by taking the bottom piece. Remember that little tooth from before? We're going to put that piece in place first, and then we're going to roll it forward. And by doing so, you make sure that it gets in there properly. And I always like to take the longest screw first at the very top center and put that one in, sort of as our placeholder, and it makes it a lot easier to put the other ones back in. Remember, all these screws may look the same size, but they're actually not. So it's really important to put the right screws back in the right place. There we go. All 5. Now we're going to replace the bracket that sits over the top of the dock connection. Beautiful. Now, the last thing we need to do is put the battery back in, but before we do, we kind of need to have this piece in place. Now remember, this is the little piece that actually rests just on top of your antenna. And if you have any trouble trying to figure out which way to put it in there, just look at the little soft pad on the back side, and that soft pad goes right on top of that round connection. So we're going to hold that in place with one thumb, and with the other, we're going to slide the battery in and reconnect, like so. And then we're going to drop the battery in, just like that. Last thing we do is reinsert the screw that holds the battery into place. Very gently put the back cover back on the phone, and then again with your thumbs, push it and slide it forward until it snaps into place. Before you put the screws in, check all sides of the back of the phone, make sure it's on there properly. And again, using your pentalobe screwdriver, replace those final 2 screws. Before powering up your phone, go ahead and reinsert the SIM tray. And there you go. Thank you for taking the time to work through our training modules. If you have any questions, comments, or even areas of improvement that you think we can do better in, contact us, please. We are your support system. We're here to help you be the best that you can be at iPhone repair. If you're seeing this, you can check out all of our guides, resources, tutorials, etc. at www.ifixphones.com.